The stench of decaying onions was overwhelming. Amid the piles of garlic and ginger in this quiet Dutch warehouse, a team of officers uncovered a secret that would rock the British underworld. Beneath the heaps of produce lay bricks of cocaine and heroin, an unlikely treasure hidden in plain sight. This was no ordinary smuggling operation. It was the beginning of the end for what would be unmasked as the largest drug trafficking ring ever discovered in the UK. The mastermind behind it? A 59-year-old man from Widnes, England, named Paul Green. To his neighbours, Green was unremarkable, just another middle-aged guy from a Cheshire town, known more for its rugby team and chemical factories than international crime. But in the criminal underworld, Paul Green had a fearsome reputation and a fitting nickname: the Big Fella. He wasn't a kingpin in the traditional sense, flaunting gold chains or running a flashy cartel. Instead, Green was a shadowy logistics expert, the go-to fixer for drug gangs across Britain looking to move massive quantities of narcotics under the radar. For 2.5 years, from early 2016 to late 2018, Green quietly built a multi-billion-pound drug empire without most people even knowing his name. He essentially ran a clandestine courier service for organized crime groups, a man who would import their drugs for a fee. Tons of Class A drugs flowed through Green's pipeline. He was the point man, coordinating between suppliers on the continent and gangs on British streets. The business model was simple. If you could pay, the big fella would get your illicit cargo into the UK, no questions asked. Green's genius, and the reason he evaded detection for so long, lay in his method. He and his crew went to extraordinary lengths to hide their operation behind the facade of something utterly ordinary: vegetables. They set up front companies that pretended to be in the food import-export business. Using false identities and even stolen personal details, they leased warehouses in the Netherlands and in northern England. These fake firms traded in produce, onions, garlic, ginger, the kind of pungent, strong-smelling goods that conveniently mask the odor of drugs. Picture a truckload of fresh onions leaving a warehouse outside Amsterdam. Nestled within the stacks of bulbous onions are dozens of sealed packages of cocaine and heroin, carefully shrink-wrapped and hidden. The Dutch warehouse workers are actually Green's accomplices, packing drugs alongside the vegetables. Once the load is ready, it's handed off to an unsuspecting haulage company, real truck drivers with no idea they're transporting more than just farm goods. The truck crosses the sea into England with paperwork showing a perfectly legitimate consignment of produce. When it arrives at its destination, another warehouse controlled by Green's network in the north of England, the criminals move in. They unload the drugs, slip away into the night, and the innocent driver carries on, none the wiser. It was a nearly foolproof system. Green's operation blended into the huge volume of international trade. Tons of produce move between Europe and Britain every day. Why would anyone suspect that a pallet of garlic or onions was hiding millions of pounds worth of cocaine? And to make the disguise even more convincing, Green's crew made sure to use the smelliest cover loads. Onions and garlic have nose-tingling odors that can throw off sniffer dogs and sensors. Sometimes they added ginger too, another strong scent to confound anyone searching for contraband. The vegetables did more than hide the smell. They also provided visual camouflage, concealing bricks of drugs under heaps of perfectly ordinary produce. The sheer scale of vegetables they handled was absurd. Green's group was buying between 40 and 50 tons of onions every single week, so many that they literally couldn't get rid of them all after extracting the hidden drugs. In some cases, they even shipped the excess onions back to the Netherlands as a return load to keep up the appearance of legitimate trade. It was a whole logistical dance. Bring in the drugs under layers of produce, then send the leftover veggies back out so nothing seemed amiss. For a while, it worked like a charm. From early 2016 onward, truck after truck crossed the channel carrying Green's hidden payloads. The operation was humming, and multiple criminal organizations across the UK were relying on this secret vegetable pipeline to supply their drug markets. Paul Green stayed in the shadows, coordinating everything through burner phones and encrypted messages. He wasn't personally unloading shipments on the docks. He left that to his trusted team on the ground. And he assembled quite a team. Green's right-hand man was Stephen Martin, a 53-year-old from Bolton who acted as the operation's financial manager, essentially the CFO of the empire, moving and laundering the millions in illicit cash. Another key player was Mohammed Ovais, 46, from Manchester, who oversaw distribution on the UK side. Once the drugs arrived and were extracted from their onion-scented hiding spots, Ovais made sure they were delivered to the various gangs who were the paying customers. There was also Russell Leonard, a 48-year-old from Liverpool who spoke fluent Dutch, a useful skill since he helped liaise with suppliers in the Netherlands and supervised the packing of drugs into shipments. On the Dutch side, Green had partners like Johannes Vesters and Barbara Reinbouw, seasoned operators in Utrecht who arranged the safe warehouses and drug supplies, coordinating closely with Green's UK team. Communication within this enterprise was critical and carefully concealed. Green and his inner circle didn't talk business over normal phone lines. They used encrypted devices, including the black market phone network EncroChat that was popular among criminals. On EncroChat, Green didn't go by Paul or even Big Fella. He chose the handle Duck Farmer. In hindsight, that alias almost seems like a cheeky nod to the produce that shielded his trade. Through encrypted chats, Green would arrange shipments, coordinate pickups, and troubleshoot problems, confident that law enforcement couldn't hear a thing. And for a long time, law enforcement was indeed in the dark. With up to 4 shipments coming in each week, the gang was raking in enormous profits and flooding Britain's streets with drugs. By the time authorities finally caught up, prosecutors would estimate £2 billion and £7 billion on worth of narcotics, by street value, had been smuggled into the UK through this scheme. Even the lower end of that estimate is staggering, an unprecedented haul for a single operation. It meant that untold quantities of heroin, cocaine, cannabis, and amphetamines were circulating in communities, fueling addiction and crime. All the while, the big fella and his crew were pocketing fortunes, living quietly off the radar. But no criminal operation runs perfectly forever. Cracks began to appear, and the first big one came in September 2016. About 6 months into the smuggling spree, one of Green's vegetable shipments was being handled by a Dutch truck driver hired to take a load into Britain. Something about the cargo made this driver uneasy, perhaps the way the pallets were stacked, or a loose piece of packaging that revealed more than it should. Trusting his instincts, the driver returned to his depot in the Netherlands instead of heading to the ferry. He called the police. When Dutch officers inspected the load, they found 8 1-kilogram bricks of cocaine hidden under a pile of onions. It was a major red flag. Clearly, these onions were cover for something much bigger. If investigators thought seizing that shipment would scare off the people behind it, they were wrong. Green's operation was nothing if not determined. After the bust, the gang went to ground briefly, then adapted and continued. Their persistence became a defining trait. They were like a hydra. Cut off one head, and 2 more would pop up. As soon as one front company or route was compromised, Green's crew would set up a new one. They shuffled paperwork, changed the names of their shell companies, moved to different warehouses, even tweaked which vegetable they used as cover. Whatever it took to keep the drugs flowing, they did it. One seizure wasn't about to stop the big fella from delivering for his clients. Indeed, by the very next month, October 2016, Green's gang attempted another large shipment, this time 57 kilograms of amphetamine worth over $1 million on the street. The drugs were loaded into a van in the Netherlands, hidden once again among legitimate goods. Russell Leonard, the Liverpool man who spoke Dutch, was put in charge of this run, along with another associate whose identity would later be kept secret by the court. Their job, watch over the van and get it safely to the UK. But in this instance, their own complacency tripped them up. Leonard and his partner had the van parked in Amstelveen, a suburb of Amsterdam, likely ready to embark for Britain the next day. But instead of staying vigilant, the 2 smugglers decided to indulge themselves. They went out drinking in Amsterdam and partied the night away, leaving the van and its valuable illicit cargo completely unattended. All night long, that van sat there, stuffed with 57 kilos of amphetamine, with no one watching. By dawn, Leonard and his accomplice stumbled back to their vehicle, perhaps thinking they had gotten away with a little night out. What they didn't realize was that Dutch law enforcement was already onto them. After the September cocaine bust, the Netherlands police and Britain's National Crime Agency, NCA, had quietly ramped up their investigation. Green's network was under surveillance, phones were being tapped, and international cooperation was in full swing. The abandoned van in Amstelveen was a golden opportunity. As soon as Leonard and his friend started the engine to resume their journey, Dutch police units swarmed in. The men were arrested and the van was seized, with all 57 kilograms of drugs still inside. When word of this debacle reached Paul Green, he was furious. His carefully oiled machine had now lost 2 shipments in as many months, and one of his trusted associates was in custody. Investigators later revealed a snippet of Green's reaction caught on a wiretap. In a recorded phone call, Green's usually calm, businesslike tone was replaced with rage and panic. He warned one of his other underlings, "If the van's gone or been grabbed by the police, then there'll be murders." The big fella was livid and possibly fearful. He knew a loss like that could unravel everything, whether through police attention or betrayal from panicked co-conspirators. Despite these early setbacks in 2016, Green's network was too deeply entrenched and too greedy to stop. If anything, they grew more cautious and more cunning. They tightened their communication protocols even further and kept innovating their smuggling tactics. Shipments continued into 2017 and 2018, and with each successful run, the gang reaped huge profits. Dozens of organized crime outfits across the UK were depending on Green's service by then, from big city syndicates to regional gangs. One of Green's clients was John Kinsella, a notorious Merseyside mob enforcer who was himself shot dead by a hitman in 2018, a stark reminder of the violent world connected to this trade. By mid-2018, after well over 2 years of massive drug imports, the authorities were closing in for good. The joint NCA-Dutch investigation had gathered enough evidence and identified enough players to make their move. It was one of the most complex drug-busting operations in recent memory, spanning multiple countries, involving undercover surveillance, intercepted messages, and painstaking analysis of shipping records and business fronts. Every time the investigators thought they had seen it all, another layer of deception emerged. But by late 2018, they had a clear picture of the enterprise and who was running it. Finally, the law struck. In coordinated actions, police in the UK and the Netherlands swooped down on the key members of the network. Paul Green was arrested, along with his lieutenants and many of their collaborators. In total, 18 people were taken down as part of the conspiracy. The onion and garlic pipeline was officially out of business. What followed was an epic legal saga. The case was so massive that the British justice system had to split the defendants into 2 separate trials at Manchester Crown Court. The first trial alone lasted 23 months, nearly 2 years, making it the longest criminal trial in modern UK history. The second trial ran for another 9 months. It wasn't until late 2024, when reporting restrictions were finally lifted after all verdicts were in, that the public could learn the full story of this extraordinary case. By the end of it, Paul Green was 59 years old, standing in the dock to receive his sentence. He had been found guilty of masterminding the colossal drug importation conspiracy, and even convicted of fraud for all the lies and stolen identities used to facilitate it. Judge Paul Lawton, who presided over the marathon trials, did not mince words as he addressed Green and his co-defendants. "Your main purpose was the importation of controlled drugs on an international and hitherto unprecedented scale," Judge Lawton said, condemning the audacity of the operation. He noted that the gang's activities had an estimated street value between £2 billion and £7 billion. "The harm caused beyond the importation is incalculable," the judge continued. "What you were actually distributing was addiction, misery, social degradation, and death." In one succinct speech, he captured the true cost of what Green had done, not just in money, but in human lives damaged. Then came the reckoning. Paul Green, the big fella who had run a multi-billion-pound drug highway under the guise of vegetable shipments, was sentenced to 32 years in prison. 32 years. For a man nearing 60, it was essentially a life sentence. The king of the onion smugglers would likely spend the rest of his days behind bars, far removed from the warehouses and trucks where he once operated with impunity. Green's top henchmen received heavy sentences as well. Stephen Martin, the money man, got 28 years in prison. Mohammed Ovais, who handled distribution, was given 27 years. Russell Leonard, whose drunken night left a van full of drugs undefended, paid for that mistake with a 24-year sentence. Even the foreign partners weren't spared. Johannes Festers was sentenced to 20 years and Barbara Reinbout to 18 years in prison. Many others in the network, drivers, middlemen, facilitators, were handed lengthy prison terms too. The authorities clearly wanted to send a message that no matter how sophisticated or large-scale a smuggling scheme is, eventually the law catches up and the penalties are severe. After sentencing, law enforcement officials spoke about the case to underline its significance. Richard Harrison, the NCA's regional head of investigations, remarked that this was an extremely high-harm crime group that used every trick in the book to evade detection. The gang had cloned legitimate businesses, stolen identities, and exploited unsuspecting people at every step. Harrison praised the partnership between UK and Dutch officers, saying they left no stone unturned over years of work to piece together the truth behind those onion shipments. It was a victory that had been a long time coming. The story of Paul Green and his £7 billion vegetable disguise is a testament to both criminal ingenuity and the dogged perseverance of law enforcement. Green managed to operate in the shadows for so long because he understood how to blend illegal activities seamlessly with legitimate commerce. His choice of cover product was bizarre yet oddly brilliant, leveraging the humble onion's pungency to thumb his nose at border security. And for a while, it almost worked. But each success only emboldened him to push further, and in the end, a mix of human error and diligent policing brought his empire down. Beyond the tactics and logistics, there's the human tale of Paul Green himself. Here was a man in his late 50s with no prior drug convictions. Someone who had even changed his name twice by deed poll to escape past financial troubles and fraud schemes. In building this narcotics empire, Green transformed himself from a struggling businessman into a linchpin of international drug trafficking. Perhaps he thought that by acting as the behind-the-scenes logistics guy, rather than a street-level dealer, he could avoid the typical gangster's fate. For years, he quietly made a fortune in the background, while the gang leaders he serviced took the spotlight, and perhaps law enforcement attention. But ultimately, being the shadowy middleman did not grant him immunity. When his operation fell apart, Paul Green was exposed and punished just as surely as any cartel boss. Now, as of 2025, Paul Green sits in a prison cell, likely reflecting on the empire that Onions built and how quickly it all peeled away. His case stands as one of the most remarkable chapters in British smuggling history, a blend of far-fetched creativity and cold-blooded criminality. The big fella from Widnes managed to smuggle literal truckloads of illicit commodities into the UK under the guise of everyday vegetables. He got away with it for a long time, but in the end, a few rotten onions and a few rotten decisions by his crew gave him away. This case has already prompted authorities to cast a sharper eye on innocuous shipments like produce. It's a stark reminder that in the international drug trade, nothing is off-limits. Traffickers will use any cover, no matter how absurd, if it might fool the authorities. It also highlights the global nature of organised crime. An unassuming town in northern England, a quiet suburb in Amsterdam, and ports across Europe were all interconnected by this scheme, driven by greed and audacity. One veteran investigator described unraveling Paul Green's network as finding a needle in a haystack, only to discover it was attached to a whole farm hidden in plain sight. In the end, step by step, investigators peeled back the layers of deception, one onion at a time, and exposed how a produce shipment could hide a £7 billion drug enterprise. The big fella's grand smuggling operation has been chopped down, and its story will no doubt be told for years to come as a warning of what cunning criminals are capable of, and a testament to the relentless pursuit that brought them to justice.